So, what is up, friends? It is Damian Howard here with another Village Talks segment. And here in this Village Talk space, it is all about having a conversation that is oriented towards the power of said village, the power of when we come together with an aspiration, hope, and determination to do the things that helps kids thrive. Guess what? We see impact in the way that they're showing up in school. We see impact and them even staying safe on the community level and them feeling that they have some responsibility even for civic engagement on the community level. Good things happen when nurturing adult figures show up and connect with young people. And by the way, that's how I define mentorship. It's those people, typically as adults, who show up and keep showing up to help others grow, right? And what's extremely fascinating as it pertains to this particular segment is Sarah, who's here with us today, is literally leading work that has impact across her whole state. Yes, it's Mentor Minnesota, but all of Minneapolis is being able to benefit from the way that Sarah and Mentor Minnesota is showing up. So, Sarah, what I would love for you to do is jump in there with an introduction to yourself. And as you give your introduction, if there's just kind of any thoughts that come to mind, things that you want to make sure that we really hone in on during our time, the floor is yours, Sarah.
Oh, thank you for having me, Damien, and I'm really excited to talk mentoring with you in the village. Mentoring is truly my entire life story, and it took me a while to understand to what extent, but I grew up in really rural Maine. And my home life wasn't always the most healthy, and I fortunately was surrounded by some incredible mentors throughout my entire childhood and truly throughout my adult life. I lived across the street from a library, and I basically lived there when I was not at school or I wasn't riding around in the woods by my house. And Anne and Judith knew me better than almost any other person on the planet for most of my childhood. And they were the first people who really seemed to invest in my intellectual self. And they were the ones that brought me new ideas and new thoughts and new books, things that they thought I might be interested in. I then had amazing mentors through my high school experience. I had a music teacher I was very close to, Mr. Whitener. And I was also surrounded by an amazing group of peers, which coincidentally, our group chat, which is still vibrant to this day, I've been texting about being on this podcast this morning, Damien, is called It Takes a Village. And so we are just a really core group of people who've really learned to support each other as we grow. And so mentoring is just has been a significant part of my childhood. And so when I went to college, I knew I wanted to focus on relationships. I knew how important those were to me. I also realized I was gay in college, started to surround myself with queer community, queer mentors. And it really solidified the importance of community, strong community. I went to school to become an educator. My background is in special education, and I was a teacher for a number of years in Washington, D.C. And I took I guess, a sabbatical after 1 year of teaching, or after my second year of teaching, and I decided to do a crazy adventure, which was canoeing the Mississippi River. And so I moved to Minnesota because of that. And that really also solidified the fact to me that mentoring and community development is not just about relationships, it's also about the ways that we connect with our environment and the ways that we're creating healthy environment in a number of different ways for young people and how important that is for young people to thrive. And so I am just so honored to be able to do this work. I got officially into mentoring through my mentor, Daryl Thompson, who runs a mentoring program here called Boulder Options. And he was the one that encouraged me to follow my passion, really learn about mentoring, learn about the science of mentoring, and extend my passion into eventually becoming the executive director of Mentor Minnesota. So this is truly a joy for me to talk about mentoring. It is a joy for me to support and mentor other mentoring leaders and just make sure that everyone in Minnesota has access to a caring relationship.
What I need to do, Sarah, and I've never felt this before in a podcast, but I need to invest and some type of sound machine that when people start off with their introduction and the way that you started off, I need some fires to come on this screen. I think I actually can do that. Like, hold on, let me see this. I can at least get the fire to come up. I can at least do a little celebration thing right there. I don't
Oh,
know.
I love
I don't think our audience is seeing that. I'm trying, y'all. Listen, I need some sound effects going. I'll do them because wow, you gave us so much, and that was so rich the way that you started off this segment. One thing I'm going to build on a lot of things that you spoke of, but one thing I want to call out, and I'm calling this out because it resonates with me. Let me give my story, and then I'm going to ask a question at some point. When I was in high school, we had a program called peer mediation.
it.
And with that particular program, and I know iterations of this still exist to this day, at you all's conference that I attended earlier this year, you had a young lady there who looked like she was still in high school herself. And she was really sharing with the community, hey, we do peer mediation. And that's our form of mentorship, which I think is so cool. I think it's so cool because I was a peer mediator in high school. It
Yeah.
was this sense of, yes, they can, young people can, and by the way, my school was less than 10% African American, and a lot of these young people that were getting in trouble and having to go see the dean, unfortunately, were a lot of my friends that look like me, right?
Mhm.
And were the same race as myself. So anyway, with this program, it was like, yeah, you can go and talk to the dean, and chances are that conversation will lead to suspension or whatever the case may be. But then you can also go and talk to Damian and other peer mediators, and we could propose to the dean and other disciplinarians an alternative path towards restoration,
Mm.
healing, reacclimation into the environment, those type of things. So I've always been very fascinated, and to your point earlier, that desire to be a support system to others has been etched in me since day one. So anyway,
Mhm.
the fact that you had that network of peers and you all probably didn't speak to it as we're mentoring each other and showing up for each other. I want you to lean more into that. Where do you see that happening in your work as ED of Mentor Minnesota? And maybe even with the research, because you also talk about the science of mentorship, which brings to my mind that there are some instances of you kind of looking at the literature and
Yep.
scholarship that's out there, like
Yep.
peer mediation. I just wonder, where have you either seen instances of this actually taking place in effective ways, and or do you have any aspirations of desiring to see more of it?
Great question. And first of all, what an amazing story you have with your peer mediation experience. And I'm so glad that you were part of that program. Um, I think there's so much power in supporting peers, supporting colleagues, supporting people doing this work because it can feel really lonely. And I did learn that as a young person surrounded by peers, and we still are sharing information about like, how are you doing this? Or tell me more about this work that you're doing. We're sharing tips, tools, support constantly. And I get the privilege to do that as the executive director of Mentor Minnesota. My colleagues and I sometimes joke that, we hold office hours or we're meeting with programs, and so much of it feels like mentoring therapy or like an opportunity for people to unburden themselves. And sometimes you just need to feel heard because your program might be doing the best it's ever been, but it's still lonely or it's still scary or you're not sure if you're doing the right thing or you're confused and don't know where to go next. And you just need more people cheering you on and providing resources, making connections. Those things really matter. And there's a lot of power in being in a room full of people that are doing work like you or have the same identity as you or are working towards the same mission and being able to share that work together. We often talk about how um, there tends to be a scarcity mindset, especially in nonprofits. Mentoring is like the opposite of that. It is the more we're together, the better we are. And so that is really something that we lean into as an organization is how are we pulling resources into the field and then sharing the benefit of those. We just did through Mentorship International a survey of mentoring professionals called Movement Makers. Um, and there's a lot of research that shows that people in mentoring who are professionals in mentoring, so I guess getting paid to facilitate mentoring relationships, are there not because they're getting paid the most. This is not the highest paid field. But these folks are super well educated. I think the average person has a master's degree. Um, a lot of folks are coming to this work because they themselves had a mentor. They're focusing on really innovative ways to provide support to community where there might not be a lot of resources. So for youth in juvenile justice systems, foster youth, youth with identities that are underrepresented in their community. And so having people who are doing that same work goes a really long way. It just makes you feel like you can breathe a little easier and it makes you excited about the work. And ultimately, I guess my main goal is that folks are excited about the community that they live in and invest back in their community. And to me, that's just a sign of a healthy environment.
Oh wow. As you were kind of talking back to just kind of that aspiration of more peers and more young people being able to share ideas and spaces where they feel a deep sense of belonging and
Yeah.
connection.
Yep.
Thought of my daughter, Sarah, right?
Mm.
And my daughter, she has all of these different, and I think it's all in Snapchat, these different segments of groups
Yep.
that it might be her volleyball group, it might be her travel volleyball group versus her school, it's the
Mhm.
baddies group, right? So in the baddies, it's all of her girls, they mostly of the same race and this and of that nature, and it's the baddies group. But what my daughter has never told me is that in any of those groups that there is an element and aspect of resource sharing that is taking place.
Mm.
An element and aspect of, hey, while we're here and we resonate very deeply along something that is, drawing us together, like let's do some stuff and let's have some conversation that empowers us,
Yep.
that helps with the development towards where we're going. And again, I'm the old guy, older guy, more mature guy, and chronologically mature guy who's
Mhm.
aspiring towards something. And if I told him, Dad, we don't need all of that type of structure, but I just wonder, are there ways, Sarah, that you and I can show up where organic grouping is already happening and kids are able to thrive in a way because they have that to say, hey, there's another aspect that you all can
Mhm.
tap into in this grouping from the field of mentorship that can help you in these ways. I wonder, is there any like support that we can give my daughter and others who are already doing this type of grouping?
Yeah. Oh, great question. What first comes to mind is that so much of what we as adults need to do is model that sort of kind of radical community for our young people. And I don't think that happens a lot. And especially now that, young people have had, and especially in the Twin Cities, first COVID, then George Floyd, and now the Operation Metro Surge, like we've had a lot of disconnection points for young people in this region where they are not going to school, they are not going out in community, and they're spending a lot of time either in their homes afraid to leave, or they are now developed systems in which they're just their world has gotten really small. And that's true for families too. And so I think the most important thing for us as adults to do is to really show that we are also sharing, we are also willing to meet community where they're at and to do that. I think that's probably one of the most radical things that we can do is just really model that for young people and then also provide space for them to experiment. And I think increasingly our young people are in structure. Their lives are very structured and quite rigid, and it doesn't allow for a lot of experimenting with how we're interacting with people. It's usually within kind of here's the way that we interact here, here's how we interact after school at this sporting event. And so mentoring provides an opportunity for young people to just kind of breathe and have space to do what they need to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I did a session with Dr. Tori, who does some
Oh,
mentorship in California.
yep.
And I'm just looking at the space that she was in as I was kind of interviewing her, and I'm like, "Are you in a rap studio or like a music studio?" And she was like, "Yeah." And then she started telling me the backstory. She was just like, "My kids asked for this, so we
Yeah,
built it for them."
right.
Right? So that space for artistic exploration or exploration in different ways that can be provided through mentorship. Yeah, I love what you're saying there. And again, that example came to mind. Sarah, as young people, people in general are exploring sexuality
Yep.
and identity,
Hmm.
and all of the things, right, that can be puzzling for young people, particularly at critical stages like, during middle school years and
Yep.
things of that nature. Talk a little bit more about the importance of mentorship at those critical junctures in life when, again, specifically, they are exploring sexuality, identity, and
Yep.
things of that nature.
Yep. Um, this is such an important time in a young person's life to have mentoring. And I do think traditionally, and how mentoring has kind of played out as an industry over the last many decades, it's been something that kids who are struggling or kids who are from really not even marginalized communities, but non-white communities, white mentors come in and they say, "Here, I'm going to fix you." And so there's been a lot of structure around how that works. Um, and I think we're seeing a phase now where people are starting to see mentoring as for everybody. We're starting to see mentoring philosophies really move away from this kind of white paradigm that we've been in. And it's allowing young people to create spaces that are vibrant for themselves. Mentoring is amazing. We all need mentors. I cited three of my huge mentors from middle school. None of them were formal mentors. They were all just teachers or community members who were in this space. And I needed someone that I could go to that wasn't a parent, that was not related to me, that maybe knew me but wasn't an authority figure in that same traditional sense, who I could experiment with. I could experiment being really interested in space, or I could experiment with kind of this different iteration of my personality, because we're all trying to figure that out. And the more that we can have mentors who are willing to say, "Okay, this is how you want to show up, or this is what you're curious about, and I am not going to have an expectation of what success looks like," then a young person can really figure out what they need for themselves. Um, so I hope I'm answering that question right, but I'm
Yeah.
just thinking of like mentoring creates autonomy
Mm,
if it's
mm.
done really well. And so that's really what I think is so important about having a mentor as a young person, really figuring out what their identity is and where they're at.
Yeah, because again, it's like even with my daughter, right? It's like certain things, like I have an amazing relationship with her, but
Hmm.
I know at certain junctures, as she matures, she needs somebody outside of her parents.
Right.
To your point, that she has that autonomous space for development, for processing, etc. Bring us to Minnesota a little bit here. What are some of your fondest activities? Oh, and even you talk about you going to Minneapolis on a canoeing expedition,
Mhm.
a canoeing kind of experience that you were looking for there.
Yep.
Yeah, like for those of us who are not familiar with Minnesota, particularly from the standpoint of how Minnesota can be an asset for young people, maybe in ways
Mhm.
that people aren't thinking about. What comes
Yep.
to mind for you, Sarah?
Oh, so much. I moved here on a whim and I really didn't know anything about Minnesota. I'd never been here. I had like barely researched it. My friends all laughed at me when I said, "Oh, I'm going to move to Minnesota." They were like, "To where?" And now that I live here, I met my wife here. We've settled down. I am fully in this community. There's so much beauty in this space, not only physical beauty, but just beauty and community. What Minnesota has is, first of all, a really strong nonprofit sector, a lot of philanthropy. People are very giving, and community really invests in programs for young people. This is a really vibrant youth state. I think especially right now, because we have so many protections for young people who are LGBTQ, this is also a really wonderful space for queer young people and their families who are really looking for safety and community and belonging. Um, on top of that, I mentioned what has happened over the last few months, especially here in the Twin Cities. This is community where I feel like we have gone through the fire and our community shows up for each other.
The fire,
We know
literally, especially like,
literally, yeah, literally, figuratively, we've gone through some stuff. And through that, the beauty of what has come out of that is like, I know all of my neighbors. I know their names, I know their kids, and that is true for, I would say, the majority of folks in the Twin Cities. And so when you're coming here, you're not just a person who lives in the city, you're part of a community. And I think that is so valuable. And when it comes to mentoring programs, we're starting to see more mentoring programs than we ever had. Folks are really thinking innovatively about how they're going to be in community and create connection. So, for example, we have one of the first LGBTQ mentoring programs for and by queer people. So matching queer youth with queer adults. It's called QueerSpace. Mentor Minnesota was also fortunate to be able to support a new program called Autism Mentorship Program, which matches autistic youth with autistic adults. So we have a space here where there's a lot of room for innovation. Folks want to get in on community. And so we have some thriving mentoring programs. We support about 200 mentoring programs across the state and estimate that we support around 130,000 young people annually, which is really incredible for us. We're small but mighty, and it's really all because we are a community. And Mentor Minnesota focuses on that community aspect for the programs that we work with.
Sarah, we're at a point in our segment whereas I want you to think as if Damien is handing over to you right now. Imagine a
Mhm.
magic. Imagine that I'm giving you a magic wand.
I
So
see it.
you, yeah, 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 there it is. There it
Uh-huh.
is. Your creative brain is able to go there automatically, right? So with said magic wand, I'm just wondering, how are you going to leverage this wand in support of the young people that you in your geographic space and or beyond
Mhm.
that have a deep care and concern for?
Mm. Wow, there's so much I want to do with this magic wand. I think primarily I want every young person in the state, I want every young person everywhere to really feel like they are seen and known by someone else in their community. And that is so important to me. I want to make sure people know their name, folks know how they're doing. They have someone that they can go to talk about the hard things with. That is primary to me. And when that happens, and I have my magic wand, that also means that when you're walking down the street, you are saying hi to people. You are stopping in and greeting your neighbor. You're at the park and you are engaging with folks that you feel safe with, that you feel known with. And there's a lot of joy. And so for me, when I'm thinking about this magic wand, it's really about creating connection so that our young people have access to that unlimited joy that I know that they deserve.
Wow, wow. Sarah, recently, so let me say this first. I have something through my medical insurance that allows me to go to a whole bunch of different gyms, right?
Mm.
Versus getting a membership at one gym, I can go to a
Mhm.
bunch of them and sign up. So I don't know, it's something about 40 plus, whereas I'm just in an exploration phase. Even this growing out my hair, this is different and new. I'm like, let's do it, right? So
Uh-huh.
I've just been trying out different gyms lately after going to the same one for the last 10 years. But anyway, I found something to be kind of refreshing and fascinating. One of the gyms that I started going to, yeah, I see people doing kind of like one of those things a little bit more often, just acknowledging my
Oh,
presence.
yeah.
Even a couple
Mhm.
of people I've gone in there and I'm like, oh, I know him or I know her in a way. Whereas in the other gym that I've been going to for a while, I go in there, put my headphones in, and I barely talk to anybody, have
Right.
connection with nobody.
Right.
So that has had me to a point whereas when I wake up in the morning, I'm on the way to the gym, and my wife asks me, "Hey, where are you going right now?" I'm telling her specifically this other gym where people know my name and they acknowledge
Yeah.
my presence. So
Yep.
yeah, and even another thing that comes to mind when you talked about the simplicity of acknowledging your neighbors on the street. I don't know, Sarah, when and where we lost that. Me growing up on the
Yep.
south side of Chicago and in a very kind of rough economic area where it's like there was like minimal access to resources for a
Mhm.
lot of the households that were in that area. Like I tell you one thing we did have, we had just such a strong sense of community whereby at the very least you're going to acknowledge people when you pass them on the
Right.
street, right? There was
Yep.
just a resonance that was there and unspoken that we didn't even have to like use words to articulate. We just understood like, oh, I see you. And I don't know when
Right.
and where we lost that, but I love that you're going to use your magic wand and bring that back. Do you not see me
Yeah.
walking past you on the sidewalk?
We will say hi.
Right? It's so simple, right? But it's just like for whatever reason, we need to bring that back.
Yep.
And I love that how we're wired
Hmm.
just kind of has something as simple as that top of mind for us. So, Sarah, we're landing this plane. What did I miss? What didn't I get an opportunity to ask or just kind of call out as we were in this space? I would love for you to correct me, help me to right my wrongs by bringing to bear whatever we may have missed.
Yeah, well, I truly could talk mentoring all day long. And so if you are listening to this and you're like, wow, I want to hear more, please reach out at mentormn.org. I would love to continue the conversation with you. I think the work that we're doing is so important because it is, again, about building relationships. Mentor Minnesota is deeply committed to doing that in a variety of different ways. And so, just one thing I want to shout out. And this is more of a program that we're doing. Two things I want to shout out, actually. First one is we have been working for the last few years on a program called Mental Health Ambassadors. And so, really equipping young people and their mentors with suicide prevention, mental health first aid, and an understanding of advocacy so that they can do an advocacy project related to mental health in their community. And so, any way that you can get involved in the mental health world in your community makes a huge difference because our young people are struggling. Just going back to your earlier question, Damien, about people figuring out their identities at this really important age, mental health is woven in through that conversation fully. And so we adults really need to step up and support them in having those conversations, making it okay to have those conversations. So that's my first thing is maybe check out what mental health resources you have in your community and see how you can be that advocate. And then the second thing is be a mentor. And that could be as simple as saying hi to your neighbor, getting to know the kids in your neighborhood, getting to know their parents, just being present. But then also, if you want to join a mentoring program doing amazing work in your community, you can go to our website, mentormn.org, or mentoring.org for Mentor National, and search your zip code in the mentoring connector and see what mentoring programs exist there. Highly recommend it. You've got incredible people doing incredible work right in your backyard, and so why not connect with them?
Sarah, before we end this, I have another question that came to mind as you were talking. One publication that I didn't even skim, I just looked at probably the like headline, if you will,
Mhm.
said that our school district, Chicago Public Schools, is in a process of having to lay off a lot of staff uh,
Oof.
just because of budgeting constraints.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask this question with very intentional language um, towards the end of, I want you to be very frank with your answer. You might not even agree, and I want to hear that and how you
Yep.
reply. I wonder, Sarah, when the systems and structures experience limitations. Like, for
Mm.
instance, the school system is at a point where we're having to fire people. And what came along with that is that we're going to also have to increase class size, which is
Right.
just going to further exacerbate issues that already exist in
Yep.
many of these schools. Is there a responsibility upon the mentorship field to help fill some of those gaps? Let me call out a subtle thing here. I'm
Mhm.
asking that question again with very with a sense of intentionality. Um, and I know that responsibility word can be huge and it might be overstated, but I ask that wanting you to respond to that? Like, is there a part that we have to play?
Yeah.
Is that a pressure that we should put on ourselves? Because I think that comes with weightiness as well. I wonder what do you think?
Yeah. I think there is absolutely a responsibility for the mentoring field to jump into that conversation, support these young people. Our mission at Mentor Minnesota, but across I'm sure this is not a radical mission, is to support young people in work, community, school. And that school matters. Like that's such a huge part of a young person's development. We need to make sure that that school environment is supporting all young people. And the bigger the class sizes, the harder it is for people who are neurodivergent, who are different learners, who might look different than their teacher. It's a lot easier for them to get lost in the shuffle and to not feel safe learning in that same environment. That's not always the case, but studies show that the smaller the class size, the better outcomes for young people. And so we as youth development professionals must have a stake in making sure that young people have access to the best outcomes possible. So, in a broad sense, yes, I think the ways that we can do that are we should be advocating for more public education funding, for teacher diversification programs, for just general awareness of what public educators are experiencing. So that is a really core advocacy part of it. And on a structural side, there are a lot of studies. We have a lot of programs here locally. And I know you mentioned Marcus out of Mentor California, who's doing incredible work with putting mentors in schools, which is showing a lot of promise for helping kids feel connected, staying in school, and thriving. And so I think there are ways that we should and must be responsible to young people by providing mentoring and the people resources in schools to help them thrive. So, in a really simple word, yes, we have that responsibility.
Sarah, wow. It's something about energy. Let me say that again. It's something about energy and specifically your energy, whereas I knew that this was going to be amazing as soon as you and I came online. The fact that you
Mhm.
did your homework and you actually were watching some of the previous segments, I think also helped us to just jump right in and have an amazing time together. Sarah, thank you so much for all that you represent, all that you do, all of the passion and heart that you have for young people and for your community. I know, Sarah, that when I show up to this space, it's all about education and inspiration. And you and
Mhm.
I think we're able to check both of those boxes with all of just the delectable goodies. That's what I'm going to call it, because it was beyond just stuff that make you feel like you're learning something. No, this stuff tasted good. It was
Yeah,
savory.
I love this
Ah.
conversation, Damian. Thank you.
So, with that, Sarah, this is another Village Talk segment for our village. We know my village and Sarah's village, and anybody else who sees this, we know that that inspiration and education was that definitely there for you. And we know that if you made it to this part of the segment, you are better and you've grown in some way by being here with us. Sarah, is there anything else that you want to call out? I want to give you the final word.
Ooh, I just want to say thank you, Damien, and thank you to the village for really supporting mentoring and seeing the value in connection. To me, I've been reflecting a lot over the last week, and I think it's coming off of an amazing weekend in which I was in community with pals and their kids and my neighbors, and just like relationships are awesome. So keeping that joy at the heart of what we do is not only really important, but so fun. And so, thank you to all the youth workers watching this. Thank you to youth workers across the country. Like, you're helping make joy possible for so many people. So, just want to give that gratitude.
All right, all right. Peace out, everybody.
Thank you.